Welcome back to my channel, Star Booze.
Any sexual tension that exists between you and Travolta during the time you were filming that movie. High levels of sexual tension. Really. Debra Winger used to be regarded as one among the 1980s best actresses, a woman with the ability to burn the screen without even a quick look, a gesture, or a statement directly from the heart. In only 3 years, she received 2 nominations for Oscars for Anna Gentleman and an Officer in Terms of, was likened to myths such as Meryl Streep and Jane Fonda became every major director's sweetheart from Hollywood in Europe. However, just over she essentially disappeared 10 years later. No shocking controversy, no public defeat, or worst part, just one unstated reiterated around Hollywood. Nobody Disaretto no longer collaborates with Debra Winger. She was described as tough, conceited, uncontrollable, and she said nothing for years. No explanations, no image without any concessions. However, like many Hollywood truths, this one is never easy. Behind each critique there is a tale behind it, behind each icy look, one that has not yet healed. Additionally, behind each Debra Winger's outburst was an insult that may have caused harm to anyone otherwise. It's the same in this piece. We'll investigate the connections that influenced and disrupted Debra Winger's career, her hurtful co-stars, the directors who attempted to keep her quiet, the producers that rejected her, as well as the relationships that didn't work out. This isn't the tale of an actress who rebels. It tells the tale of a woman who had the courage to in a world that only loved those who said no, who said yes. Travolta, John from Affectionato, a slap that breaks teeth. In 1980, Urban Cowboy was more than simply a sensation. Function that elevated Debra Winger to the map of Hollywood. Additionally, it was the first when she was in a relationship passion, yet equally rife with unpredictability. John was her co-star Travolta, a budding celebrity who recently fevered on Saturday night. Charming and rebellious, friendly but erratic. Since their initial encounter, Winger felt that something wasn't right. Travolta didn't begin with a salutation or an easy. Rather, he inquired if she was Jewish, and right away subsequently inquired as to whether she had attended college. Appearing innocuous inquiries, but they provided Winger with assailant bias, a subtle judgment, an assessment based on looks, background, and education. Lastly, he said something obscenely sexual about her, never made public. However, in the midst of that initial conflict, something continued to burn like a movie. Chaos drew itself in. They ran into each other. On the screen, they turned into a stormy, fiery pair. Out of the frame, they started a genuine partnership, euphoric, but filled with poison. In a romantic scene, they told Travolta to slap Winger's character, a typical phony hit similar to an Ianatha movie take. However, when the cameras he rolled and gave her a hard slap so difficult one of her teeth was broken, there was it. Apologies. No time to see how she was doing. Just both bodily and, worse, emotionally. And in an odd turn following that slap, Travolta asked her to marry him. Winger declined. No long explanation nor dramatic scene. No, she responded simply. An automatic response, understanding that passion in the relationship had faded. Into control and dominance. She strolled away from that warped view of him. However, the fractures from that, the first significant connection would come next her during her professional life. When questioned about Travolta years later, she didn't reply with resentment, not affection, just quiet, the sort that comes from someone who once trusted, loved, and was once somewhat harmed by Hollywood. Never allows someone the opportunity to genuinely look over the brick wall that Richard Gere. Unbreakable, A Policeman and Omar Mark was one of the best Debra's artistic accomplishments. Career of Winger. She was awarded an Oscar. Critics commended the nomination for her genuineness and depth of feeling. However, it was an experience that she blatantly explained. That wasn't something I loved. Film as I was working on it, and I didn't love it now. For sure, Richard Gere, a co-star, the guy audience has pursed as endearing, quiet, and heartfelt, was to Winger nothing but a wall made of bricks. There was seriousness in that phrase. For many years it came to represent their resistance and separation between two those that were unable to connect off-screen despite portraying a classic romantic couple on the screen. Who said it? Louise Jr. The person who played the tough drill sergeant later attested in his autobiography that Gere and Winger stayed apart from one another while the cameras weren't in motion. No discussions, no engagement, not even a glimmer of heat. Richard Gere never deigned. During one interview, he acknowledged they were at odds with one another, although provided no additional justification. Winger, however, he was much more direct. While speaking with the Daily Mail, she acknowledged that she was insecure. She became agitated about performing, and she frequently vented to her co-stars, particularly Gere. I let it out on everyone. However, the battle wasn't online. The deepest wounds for Winger came from the rear of the camera. In an interview with The Telegraph, she disclosed that Taylor Hackford, the director, and she was treated by producer Don Simpson. Similar to faulty products. Simpson, renowned for his offensive remarks against women, once declared categorically that Winger was not fable, an offense that would not be forgiven even by the Hollywood standards of the 1980s. And that wasn't the end of it. Winger remembered instructed to use diuretics on specific days because, as per her face appeared swollen to filmmakers on screen. These weren't medical suggestions. They originated with the guys within the editing room. Men who were sensitive right to control a woman's body as if she were merely a prop. Winger was incensed, but she refused to give up. She took issue with a certain moment that she thought it compromised her integrity, character, and the whole filming process came to a stop. Although Taylor Hackford was furious afterward, after watching the video, to acknowledge that Winger was entirely correct. From the perspective of acting, the issue was in Hollywood. Correctness doesn't mean it's a pardon, particularly if you're a female. When a male performer stops creation rather than discontent, he's a meticulous. Winger was branded when she did it. Challenging, unmanageable, an issue. Taylor and Don Simpson Hackford. When the bully turns into the producer. Tensions with Debra Winger, Richard Gere and other co-stars may have been aloof, unresponsive and tainted with quiet. However, what transpired behind the camera, particularly with Taylor, the director Don Simpson, the producer, and Hackford were something far more degrading. A regular degradation of dignity that eroded piece by bit her sense of worth of a gentleman and an officer. Winger proved to be more than just an actress. Her art, she was a young lady, negotiating a male-dominated system, and those males didn't try to conceal their ambition to rule over everything, including her physique. Taylor Hackford, the strong, however the strict director was previously direct. Winger characterized it as a beast. It wasn't offensive. The primary reaction of a person who has been shoved too many times into a corner. According to Winger, she was often treated similar to a second-rate performer, in spite of the film's emotional core. However, the most severe injuries weren't caused by behind the lens. They originated in theatrical space. Producer Don Simpson, notorious for being cruel, obscene, and fixated on domineering actresses, said once in front of the whole crew. Debra Winger wasn't sufficiently able to take the initiative. A terrifying insult containing sexism and the object has long been a problem in the sector. It didn't stop there either. Following every shooting day, Simpson would examine the video and determine her face appeared swollen. She had two diuretics, no speaking with Anna regard for her doctoring devil comfort. Had she not looked, she was so stunning on film that she had to take medication. Debra Winger has left. Quiet, she resisted once she declined to film a sequence because she felt utterly misrepresented the psychology of the character, an action over position that would have been regarded as standard practice for male actors oft moment. However, it earned Winger descriptors challenging, problematic, and left her alone in her own movie. Director Hackford became enraged with the delay in output. However, after examining the scene and giving her another evaluation, he had to concede that she was correct for her reasons. Not only is it emotionally correct, but psychologically and structurally sound in her interpretation. However, that acknowledgement read without expressing regret, just a silent caution. There's no way you can easily manage. Additionally, in Hollywood, there is nothing more dangerous than a woman who is uncontrollable. Then Winger never collaborated with Hackford on a film, or Simpson once more. She hardly ever mentioned them during interviews. Yet, when questioned, her weight of quiet was an indictment. I still remember. I've simply decided not to go through that again. Madonna. The path is different, and the league is different. Early in the 90s, Debra Winger was positioned as the head of a league of personal, poignant tale about women baseball players in the Second World War. When a project loses its heart, it is no longer worthy of your skill or your honesty. Like a skilled craftsman who examines inferior materials and refuses to start, Gina Davis took her position. The movie became a big hit, achievement and a treasure. The aspect of American popular culture. Winger, however, had no remorse because, to her, being absent can occasionally the last artistic performance an actor can execute. Milan Shirley, a conflict that will never be at ease. Debra has one of the most stressful relationships. Nothing beat Winger's experience. The person she called Shirley man and screen mother, but never quitted phoning a co-worker in person. In there, played the roles of mother and in Terms of Affection. A daughter cinematic masterpiece and the recipient of the finest Oscars, as well as a movie that received nominations for both actresses for Top Actress. However, the movie told a heartwarming tale of parental love. The set was a silent battlefield in which two women with strong wills clashed in every scene, each look, each disruption. On the set where they initially met, Milan, already legendary, having won 3 Oscars nominations, showed up wearing a fur jacket, an exquisite attire, and the composed demeanor of vintage Hollywood. Winger appeared, however, wearing combat boots, a bold gaze and a short skirt. Lane in her account, she later said, "I saw her, oh my God, it wasn't a judgment. It was the automatic warning of someone who was not of the same generation." James L. Brooks, the filmmaker, from the beginning had to give in. Nobody was able to comprehend their. Furthermore, they didn't. The height of the tension was when Winger, always aggressive and impetuous, shouted at Milan she missed her mark during a take. "You hit the mark." Milan, not one to be snapped back and rattled. "I am aware of it means hitting a mark." At that point Winger moved away. gently raised her skirt, glanced over her shoulder and let out a fart in the face of Shirley MacLaine later. MacLaine described this incident in her Me Lucky Stars, a memoir. Winger didn't refuse to believe it. When questioned on a chat show in 2018 by Andy Cohen if the narrative concerned it was true that she licked her feet and farted, smiled slightly and remarked, "There sure was truth to that." They didn't despise one another as if they were adversaries. They like untamed animals. They challenged one another, confined in the same cage as just one might come out unharmed, at least in terms of size. Following Milan's Oscar victory, she entered the stage and gave the now famous phrase, "I deserve this," yet it wasn't intended just for Winger. Although the whole who stood in its shadow was known to the room. "We didn't have lunch," Winger subsequently stated mutely, but there was deference. Their respect that boxers have for one another following a vicious battle. You are aware of when your opponent uses lethal maneuvers. You never desire a rematch. Almost 40 years have gone, yet it hasn't been forgotten by the people. Talk shows continue to inquire. The press continues. Toe brings it back to life. Additionally, each time Winger simply smirks, allowing others to rebuild the story however they see fit. Since some win or lose, battles never really go away. John Malkovich, a disguised runway modelist, a performer. Debra, by the late 1980s swinger, had experience working with a variety of partners. Some are lovely but poisonous. Others were so reclusive that they felt like strangers from being physically hostile lovers of emotionally erratic mothers who use screens. However, in 1990, on the set Within the Sheltering Sky, she came across a novel type of companion, John Malkovich. Ash called the man a runway, quite plainly model. Not due to his good looks, not bogus to his colorful attire, but bogus, according to Winger. He looked like though he were acting himself, rather than the personality. Winger saw that as thefanal transgression. She supported unadulterated, sincere behavior in the heat of the moment, tender grounded link between two individuals in a common frame. However, Malkovich, his abstract style, icy stare, and a manner of talking as though he were recounting a monologue inside of oneself, was not even noticeable to her. In each scene, no scene partner was visible to her. She noticed an attractive exhibition without a soul. Winger never concealed her emotions. No evasions, no analogies. In one interview when questioned about the experience, she didn't work with Malkovich. Hold on. He resembled a model on the catwalk. He shifted exquisitely. He had a lovely face. However, I didn't know to whom I was speaking. A few claimed that Winger's envy was snapping because her co-star failed to talk to her. However, to those who had not surprisingly, I worked with her pretend was something she detested. She rejected performances that were directed toward the audience rather than being grounded in real life, a personality, and the protective sky. Despite being meticulously built by Bernardo Bertolucci, the filmmaker, wealthy with eerie Moroccan scenery and depth of thought, was for Winger an void encounter. Not due to the script, not due to the photography, however due to the man every day. I sit across from her and never genuinely met her gaze. Then Winger never collaborated with Malkovich on the film once more, and she didn't mention him in later life. He stayed there was only a slight wisp in her rockle. Similar to the acting's very style, she was unable to accept being chilly, aloof, and callous. Over the course of 20 years, Debra Winger had neither in Hollywood ability, notoriety or charm. She had famous parts, nominations for Oscars, and viewers who adored her for her unvarnished, pure honesty. However, she also had nothing that was rarely accepted in Hollywood: a lady, an ego, a brain, and refusal to follow instructions. For males, these attributes are referred to as independence and creative vision. For Winger, they turned into challenging, impractical, and hazardous. James Bridges, the director, once acknowledged in an interview in which he was furious he stopped production with Winger when she wouldn't make a scene. However, later after reviewing, he had to acknowledge that she was absolutely correct. Winger did not oppose sabotage, she just wouldn't stay quiet when the facts were misrepresented. When a fictional character was created, as soon as the actress became a puppet for male dominance. Once, she stated, if an actor accomplished what I did, they would refer to him as meticulous. I was trouble, though. Hollywood is not as forgiving of women as that. Those who refuse to be forgiven are not forgiven. Bow to the directors who lever roles they don't trust, who talk sincerely spoken over glorified minsters. Winger was aware of it, knew it well. Standing in an open field in 1995 Ireland, next to her spouse, she turned to him and uttered a short phrase. I'm finished. No drama, no regrets, and no media meeting to declare retirement. Shaggiest took a step back, understanding that the available roles were simply worn out. Copies of her previous actions, no more difficulties, less integrity conversion, and there's no reason to continue tolerating it. She decided to go to Amatha, a spouse, and a silent witness to the globe, to pick tiny stages instead of redrugs, to live creatively rather than devoted to the arts. Winger Debra wasn't a Hollywood's wicked girl. She didn't destroy settings, failed to fight addiction, didn't use press manipulation to construct myths. She simply was unsure on how to bow her head and never discovered the truth. Perhaps that's what does Hollywood, a location that favors dutiful ladies who were unsure of what to do alongside her. Perhaps that's also the reason she will always be remembered. Debra Winger remained visible because she left when she was still at summit, when she had options, when she was still able to refuse. Additionally, that decision-making process in Hollywood's perspective is the only thing it was never able to pardon. People didn't like her. She didn't stoop to accommodate the male-frame directors have resigned in advance. She wasn't scared of upsetting co-stars. She didn't pretending to be soft in order to maintain their next position. She wouldn't give in. Is her biggest transgression in and compliance is the foundation of the industry. Debra Winger fought, sustained injuries, and washed aside. However, she never betrayed, and maybe that's more valuable. More than 3 golden Oscars. As more up-and-coming actresses start to raise awareness of injustice, the pressure to be quiet on how their dignity and image are managed, though the world at last comprehends. Winger battled just decades ago, without social media, devoid of supporters, without an campaign using hashtags. She only had one something, a voice that would never be quieted. If someone wants to know why Debra in the movie Winger was never adored, ask them this industry. Was it because she was too challenging, or perhaps because she had the courage to speak what others were scared to? How about you? If you were in the shoes of Debra Winger, sandwiched between would you rather have freedom or fame? Leave a comment with your ideas and if this narrative inspired you to think about it. And remember to click follow in order to avoid missing the next courageous, defiant we bring the soul into the light.